touch earth before touching a screen.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
So first thing in the morning when you wake up, resist the temptation when the alarm on your phone goes off to start checking your email or check social media or whatever. Just don't even touch that phone. Walk outside, even if it's cold outside, take your socks off, take your shoes off, and even if it's just for a few seconds, plant your feet on the ground, look up at the heavens, look up at the sky, and put things in perspective. And that practice right there, for me, sets the tone for my entire day. And it doesn't matter if you wake up and the sun has risen, or for, like in my case, you wake up and it feels like the middle of the night, it's still dark outside. That practice sets the tone. So that's a simple thing.
Welcome back to the 7-Figure Leap podcast. I say this a lot, but I really, really mean it today. I'm really excited about this interview. I finally get to connect with someone that I've admired from afar for probably over 15 years in a professional way, and more so recently in a personal way. And so Ryan Levesque is our special guest today. We'll talk a little bit about his business history and things. 7-time Inc. 5000 entrepreneur, 2-time national bestselling author. The credentials are there. When I think of Ryan, the thing I admire actually is he's a devoted husband. He's got 2 awesome kids. He's made some really drastic and I think fruitful life decisions in service of what he's optimizing for right now in the season of his life. And that's really what I want to mostly focus on today. So Ryan, first of all, just like thanks for being here. Lots of gratitude. I'm glad we're able to connect here. We're in a group called Front Row Dads, and we've danced around each other at different events, but we've never actually connected. So I'm really excited to have you here.
Well, Dustin, man, it's an honor, and I feel a tremendous amount of gratitude to be able to have this conversation. So I'm really grateful for the invitation and excited for this conversation.
Awesome. Well, I think it's necessary. I don't want to spend a ton of time in the past, but I do want to give people context. Most people in the marketing world probably know you or know some of your story, but wherever you think is appropriate, if you can give sort of that Cliff's Notes version of where you started with your entrepreneurial journey and kind of get us up to close to present day. And then we'll spend most of our time talking about what you're up to now and then future pacing for yourself and our audience about some of the things that you want to share with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I founded a company back in 2008 that became the Ask Method Company on the back of a book that I wrote called Ask. And it was a book at the time when it was released that became the #1 marketing book of the year, voted by Inc. magazine and Entrepreneur magazine. And when it released, it was the #1 book in the country across all categories. And so it was sort of the seed that birthed this business around this idea of, instead of trying to figure out what people want, going through the process of understanding at a very deep emotional level what it is that your market truly desires, and then being able to serve at the absolute highest level. So using a unique combination of surveys and quizzes and assessments, built a business around that. Later built a software company, which was the marketing technology that served that. And collectively, both businesses, as you mentioned, 7-time Inc. 5000. And in 2024, last year, we sold our software company to a strategic buyer who happened to be our #1 competitor in the market, which is very
Not a
interesting.
bad move.
Yeah, it was a very interesting experience. So our software technology traded under the name Bucket, and we sold to a company called ScoreApp in the UK, which was co-founded by Daniel Priestley. And today I sit on the board of advisors of that company and play a role in that capacity. And have made some pretty big life moves in the last few years. So that's a short and sweet 60-second version.
That's beautiful. And I will just interject one little thing. So a lot of our audience they're experts in their field and they love marketing through relationships and partnerships, and service is like service above all in the way that we treat our customers. And so what I don't want people to get the impression is Ryan's only ever been in the ivory tower and had this massive business. I actually, when I started following you, you had an orchid company and like the plant. And so, and you grew that very successfully, but that was like you and your wife. And so you know what it means in many seasons of your life to bootstrap, and you understand this journey from 6 figures to 7 figures that a lot of our listeners are in currently, right?
Yeah, I mean, the slightly longer version is that, I started my business with $500 in my pocket and a laptop computer. And, after I graduated from college, I worked. I was, working in a cubicle. I was working in insurance and had a bit of a quarter life crisis where I said, I just saw my future as being in a cubicle or in an office. And I saw my boss, who was getting close to retirement. He was in his 60s. And I just saw the next 40 years of my life. And I said, I don't want that to be my life. And I had this fire inside of me to do something. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted to do something. And so I started a business. I learned at the time, this is like in 2006, 2007, I learned about online marketing and just all the skills that I didn't have around building a business online. And we entered in the first market that we went into was the most random of markets. So before the orchid business, we went into the Scrabble tile jewelry.
That's right. I remember that now. Yeah.
Teaching people how to make Scrabble tile jewelry. And that's when I learned the power of selling education and training. And the reason for that is, and this is like the instructive lesson here, in 2007, we came into this business, the Scrabble tile business, because there's a brand new website at the time, which is obviously huge now, but it was a startup at the time called Etsy.com.
Oh, wow.
And so it was like a total startup at the time. But my wife was starting to follow the site, and she saw this jewelry that was selling like crazy, because on Etsy, like eBay, this is like a business lesson, you can see the sales of every seller on a day-to-day basis. And you can effectively like reverse engineer how much money someone's making by just, tallying up, 10 sales of $25 in one day. Man, she's making $250 a day selling this jewelry. That's not that bad, right? So she reverse engineered the sales of this jewelry, and she said, this is selling like crazy. We should sell this jewelry. And I thought, well, that's like not the business I want to be in. But all right, I'll consider it. And then a few weeks went by, and then she came back to me again and said, look, I want to talk to you about that Scrabble tile thing again. And I said, yeah, but I just don't think that's the business that we want to start. And she said, no, time out. Take a look at this woman here. And ironically, this woman's first name was Ryan. It was Ryan, awesome. A girl, right? And she was selling this tutorial on how to make this jewelry. And my wife bought it. Frankly, it wasn't very good. It was like a Microsoft Word document that was barely formatted. It was like 7 pages with spelling mistakes and homemade photos. I mean, really wasn't that great. But she was selling like 20 to 30 a day of this digital tutorial that she was selling at the time for probably like $25. And then you do the math and you think, she's making $500 a day, almost all profit, selling this. That's a heck of a lot better business than selling the jewelry that you're making yourself by hand painstakingly, that you're selling for a few bucks each. We effectively built a better mousetrap. So we learned how to make the jewelry. Well, my wife learned how to make the jewelry. We built a better tutorial that was like really, really well done. And then we started selling that. We sold a few other tutorials in that niche, like making other crafts and other jewelry using similar but slightly different techniques. And we grew that business to, if I recall, about $8,000 a month. Just in selling, tutorials. And then we learned the difference between an evergreen market and a fad market. I don't know if you heard about this. It made the news. The worldwide Scrabble tile jewelry market crashed shortly after we got into this market.
Everyone remembers where they were at in that moment. Is
exactly,
like 9/11, financial crisis, Scrabble tile. Yeah,
so. Exactly. And it was just like one of these silly little fads, that we see that like it goes crazy for a few months and then it just disappears. And it was one of those things. And so our business basically went, cratered to just like maybe $1,000 a month or a few $100s a month. And we had kind of one of these like, oh crap moments, and decided to shift gears. And that's when we went into the orchid market, which is a story for another day, which then led us into the memory improvement market, and then led me to partner, speaking of partnerships, with a number of other businesses in the golf instruction space, tennis instruction space, the fitness instruction space, all these different markets. Effectively, I went into about 24 markets. And that's where I refined the marketing methodology that became known as the Ask method, which is what my first book, Ask, was about. And that was the seed to start the business. So, I started really like, kitchen table business with a simple little laptop, working with clients as a consultant, as a coach. I structured the work that I was doing in a very specific way where I was effectively a revenue partner in these businesses. So I would get paid, I call it like the 3R model. Where I get paid a retainer, I'd get paid an upfront fee, and I'd get paid a rev share or a royalty on all the sales that we generated. And in that experience, I had a few client partners that we did really, really, really well. One of our projects in the golf space for a company at the time was called Revolution Golf. And we built a funnel that we were getting about 10,000 golfers a day.
Wow.
Yeah. So we built a multi-million person list in the golf space and built a very successful business, and ultimately led to an acquisition by NBC and the Golf Channel. So I was like, okay, I cracked a code on something. and then did it in the B2B space, in the business funding space with a company called Swift Capital that we rebranded into Loan Builder, which was an assessment for figuring out what type of business loan or business funding is right for your business. And then we sold that business to PayPal for about $180 million.
Holy moly. I didn't know that part. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So that like it all like it, but you start very simply and, it's like any of these things. Like my goal, my big dream, Dustin, when I started my business was I wanted to make $10,000 a month. Like that was my number. It's like, if I can make $10,000 a month, work from home, not have to travel, not have to commute, and we can live anywhere we want, that would be amazing. And it took 10 years to do this. So it's definitely not overnight. It's like not get rich quick, get rich very slow. But it took me 10 years and to get to $10 million a year in our business. And then we grew that to about almost $20 million a year and a top line revenue, and generating at the time at our peak between 5 and 7 million a year in profit, bottom line profit. So, figured it out. Like we were able to crack the code and learned a lot. I mean, made every mistake in the book, learned a ton, and then ultimately kind of created the opportunity to live the life that you and I have been talking about, which is this return to real and really focus on fatherhood and, not grinding for grinding's sake, but like knowing when enough is enough, and then, deciding to live life and answer that question that we were talking about, knowing what it is that you're optimizing for.
Yep. And that's, well, I'm really glad that we took a little backwards
That
tangent.
that was like the 5 or 6 minute version of the story.
That was beautiful though. And I've followed you for a long time, and there's quite a few things in there that are new to me. And I think what a gift to the audience, because it's so instructive to, what I want people to hear in that is the through line, right? It's like experimentation, applying what works in one maybe micro instance into something bigger and then bigger and then bigger. And it brings us to kind of where I really wanted to dig in here and double click is this kind of last year in your life, which is really interesting. You obviously had the exit. That's amazing. But I think even before the exit or right around here, this is the part you can give a little color to. But you guys like moved from Austin to Vermont, and you're like running a farm. And there's this idea of returning to real, which I really want to apply to business as for like most of the rest of the interview. But maybe to give us some I assume that came out of your own response to what am I optimizing for? So I'd love to hear kind of the story, the genesis behind these big life changes you've taken.
Yeah. So if I go back to 2020, 2021, we made the decision that we were going to take our business to market, meaning we were going to sell our businesses, our combined businesses. We had a training and education company, consulting company called the Ask Method Company, and then we had a software company called Bucket. And they're very synergistic, very much symbiotic in many ways. So we packaged it together as a single sale. We took the business to market with a couple twists and turns and winding roads along the way. Eventually, we received an offer for $70 million to buy both businesses. And I wish I could say that the storybook ending, ended with the end, and then they all rode off into the sunset. But the punchline is that the deal fell apart. And the deal fell apart for a few different reasons, some of which were challenges with the business. It's a very unique asset to have a software company and a training education company. So it's like it poses some unique challenges.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we ran into macroeconomic headwinds. We started the process in a very favorable M&A environment in 2021 when interest rates were near zero. There was a ton of M&A activity. And by the time we got into early 2022, things started to shift. There were fears in the marketplace of a general recession. Russia had invaded the Ukraine, which had spawned, fears of like World War III. Interest rates started to rise. So at the beginning of the year, they were next to zero. By the end of the year, I think they were 4.5%, the Fed rate in the United States. And long story short, almost all M&A activity sort of ground to a halt, certainly in the space that we're in the vertical. And so this is relevant to the question that you pose, which is, so at the end of this, I'm on this like 10-year, effectively what's felt like a sprint, 10-year sprint. In this 10 years, 7 timing 5,000, we generated over $100 million in revenue. I'd grown my team to almost 100 employees. Like it just was like a rocket ship, but it was exhausting. And I could see that the path that I was on, I was going to burn out. I could not keep doing what I was doing. So when we didn't sell the company and we kind of ran into that issue, I decided to hit the pause button and take a little bit of time to just regroup. I just turned 40 at the time. So it's like a milestone birthday and you really think about life. And I kind of reflected and realized like I'd spend the first half of my life with my face in front of a screen in many ways. And I asked myself, what do I want to spend the next half of my life, the second half of my life, the back half of life? And I felt increasingly called, to the way I've described it, to spend the second half of my life with my hands in the dirt. And so in the summer of 2022, incredibly understanding wife gave me permission to take a little bit of time off to live and work on a farm in the Mad River Valley of Vermont.
Wow.
And so I took some time off in the summer to live in a tent by a pond outside at a farm in the Mad River Valley. And
your Thoreau experience here.
my Thoreau experience.
Okay,
This was my Walden experience. Absolutely. And it was incredible, man. I mean, I was doing a deep dive into the world of permaculture. I'd maybe read, 24 books on permaculture. I'd come into this through food. Food was my gateway drug. Just as I love to cook, I cook for my family. It's something I've really been passionate about. And when you start diving down the road of cuisine, you really focus on the quality of the ingredients. And so naturally, you start at the grocery store, then you go to Whole Foods, then you go to farmers markets. And then what you realize is that even the food at Whole Foods and farmers markets and the practices used to raise and grow a lot of that food is not that much better in many cases than what's available conventionally at a regular grocery store. So the natural conclusion that you get to is, well, I've got to raise and grow my own food. That's the only option. So I'm in Vermont and I'm there, and man, I don't know if you've ever had one of these moments where it's not even your brain, it's like your full body. This is where I'm meant to be.
Yep.
And I just felt my heart pulling me in this direction. And at the time, we were considering if we wanted to leave Austin. We were in a suburb of Austin, and we were there through the whole explosive growth. So when we got to the town that we lived in was called Georgetown. And Georgetown was about 20,000 people when we moved there. That's what the US Census read. And when we left Georgetown, a little over a decade later, it was over 100,000 people.
Holy moly. Wow.
Yeah. So it 5x'd in a decade. And it just was not, a great place to live, great place to raise a family, attracted a lot of people. But we saw the stress on infrastructure. We saw the issues around water security. We lived through the winter storm of Texas, and we saw sort of the risks associated with that. And it led us to maybe rethink if that's where we wanted to be. I'm from the Northeast. I'm from New Hampshire. My parents still live in New Hampshire. When I applied to college, I applied to 2 colleges, one in Rhode Island, Brown, and one in Vermont, Middlebury. I got into both, ultimately chose to go to Brown. I was accepted there early. I could have played soccer at Middlebury, didn't. And so there was always a small piece of my heart that was tied to Vermont. I felt like I had unfinished business. So long story short, I go there, I'm at this farm, and we're considering putting our house on the market. And we had pictures taken, lined up a real estate agent, did a fancy video, walkthrough, aerial video, drone footage, the whole thing of our place in Austin. And this trip to Vermont was going to be the decision-making trip. And so while I'm there with 1 bar of service in the Green Mountains of Vermont with no cell service, I text my wife and I say, I think this is meant to be. We should do it. Let's do it. Pull the trigger, put the house on the market. And within 24 hours, the house sold, all cash, full price, 14-day close.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's another sign, right?
I had to fly back from Vermont to Texas. We hired a moving company out of Boston with a B, and they drove cross country, put everything we owned into these moving trucks, shipped them into storage, sold one of our vehicles, loaded up the family, loaded up the dog. Everyone got a suitcase, put it in the back of the truck, and we road tripped from Texas to Vermont with nowhere to go.
You didn't own this farm. You're hanging out on someone else's farm.
I was working. I was just there. It was done, right? I was going through a PDC, a permaculture design certification, and doing some work on this farm. And so we lined up a whole bunch of visits to tour different properties, to purchase a property. And between the time we left Texas and the time that we arrived in Vermont, 5 out of the 7 properties that we had lined up sold.
Wow.
And then the other 2 were not a fit. And this is in the fall. This is in autumn. It's in leaf peeper season. So it's the beautiful autumn that you've seen on every calendar of photos of every Vermont calendar. So it's absolutely stunning. Real estate market is super hot. And we realized, oh crap, we're not going to find a place to live. So instead, we spent the next year bouncing around Airbnbs and jumping from place to place. And it gave us an opportunity to tour different parts of the state and really decide where we wanted to be. And then ultimately, after knocking on every door and telling our story to anyone who would listen, every waiter,
We're homeless. We need
exactly. We're like,
something.
hey, like, where do you, we're actually looking. Do you happen to know anybody who has a farm or anything? We were like, we got known across the state as the crazy family from Texas. So it took us about a year and a half. And then we finally landed at our place that we're at right now. And so we're on our site now. We landed at a place, we're on about 100 plus acres.
Oh, wow.
It's stunning. And we, in the last year, made the transition to raise and grow about 80% of the food that we eat as a family. So we raise cattle, we raise pigs, we raise laying hens for eggs. We did 100 meat birds this year. So we raised and processed 100 meat birds. We've got multiple ponds on the property, one of which we stock with trout. So we have a fish supply. We have 48 beehives on the property. We've tapped, we have 1,000 maple taps. So we tap our own maple syrup. So we have 100% of our sweetener between the honey and syrup produced on farm, 100% of our protein between the beef, pork, chicken, and eggs and trout that we produce on farm. We planted 500 trees. So nut trees, fruit trees, berry bushes. We've got like 30 different kinds of berries on the property. And then we did a few acres of production garden. So, we grow, our potatoes and all of our root vegetables and squash and onions and garlic, all the things that you'd expect, tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, all of our herbs, all of our green. And between overwintering and root cellar, made it through this past winter, with freezers full of protein and sawdust bins full of root vegetables. So it's been an incredible journey and an incredible learning experience doing this. And it all comes back to what you're talking about, this desire for the return to real, this desire to not just live in this abstracted world that we experience through 14 square inches that we can fit in our hands, but actually living life, truly hands in the dirt. And I mean that, like, in my case, literally, but also metaphorically, figuratively, actually, being in this real world and existing in our our body's existence, not just in our mind. So, that's a bit more of the story.
I appreciate it because and probably the way you would normally tell it. And I appreciate the freedom by which you're opening up here. It's amazing. It's super inspiring. But I think even in there's a business lesson of, I think what most people would hear in your story without that color is, oh, Ryan sold his thing in Austin and he's like, got a farm, and that's cool. But no, it's like a several year journey with like this parallel story of thinking you're selling the company and that falls through. And so you still got all that to deal with, and you got a wife and 2 kids, and you're like on your own in the summer and like kind of pouring yourself into a whole new intellectual journey with permaculture and agriculture and all that stuff. It's like, that's a really good microcosm for some people who are like, I want to go from selling courses to coaching or from coaching to consulting, it's never a simple, straight, linear path. There's always some sort of erratic, underline. And even with some of the fortuitous things that you had with selling the house really fast, that sounded really good at the beginning of your story. I'm like, oh, he finally gets the fairy tale ending. And it's like, no, they were homeless for 2 years and running around trying to find a place to sleep. So that's amazing. I'm really glad that we were able to dig into that. And I know I also want to be conscious of time. So kind of putting our business hats on for a moment and speaking to the audience here, who I think I'll just say for myself, I know I deeply feel this with 3 teenage kids and a wife of 23 years, really feel this need to return to real, right? And so I kind of microdose that, like take my kids fishing, and we live in suburbia, but and I do desire to have a smaller but meaningful farm of my own in several years. So I think there's these sort of lifestyle things we can do. But let's say people don't have that freedom and they're like, you know what, I'm making my $10,000 a month and we're paying the bills and things are good, but like I still want more fulfillment. I still want to get unhinged from this whole digital existence, even if that some of that's required for my online business. What are maybe some simpler ways or some ways that online entrepreneurs who are coaches and consultants can start to experience this return to real without maybe such a dramatic shift as you've been through?
I'll give you a few simple ones, right? And I think it's the way you described it, microdosing makes a huge difference. It's like, I'm always looking for what's the minimum viable dose.
Yeah.
of anything. So I'll give you a few. One of our mutual front row dad's brothers and a dear friend of mine, Ali Jafarian, has this expression that I've adopted, and it's a practice that I've adopted in my life. And it goes like this: touch earth before touching a screen.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
So first thing in the morning when you wake up, resist the temptation when the alarm on your phone goes off to start checking your email or check social media or whatever. Just don't even touch that phone. Walk outside, even if it's cold outside, take your socks off, take your shoes off. And even if it's just for a few seconds, plant your feet on the ground, look up at the heavens, look up at the sky, and put things in perspective. And that practice right there, for me, sets the tone for my entire day. And it doesn't matter if you wake up and the sun has risen, or for like in my case, you wake up and it feels like the middle of the night, it's still dark outside. That practice sets the tone. So that's a simple thing. Another principle in the return to real movement is as follows: more time with God-made things, less time with man-made. And really what that means, if you think about your day-to-day existence, if you're like most people, 99.9% of the world that you interact with is the man-made world. It's things made by man. So unless we're intentional about carving out even 10 minutes a day to coexist and interact with God-made things, things that the hand of man has not touched, is just enough to bring things back into balance. So there's some simple practices like that that can give you the minimum viable dose. For me, we raise our own food, we grow our own food, and I'm the cook in the family. So I bake, and some weeks I'll bake 6 to 9 loaves of sourdough in the oven. I try to cook dinner for our family at least 6 nights a week. So we might go out to eat one night a week. So, but 6 nights a week, we're having dinner at home or with friends, with meal. Like the meal that I made last night is a chuck roast that we put one of our cows in the freezer, carrots, potatoes, shallots, garlic, all from our farm. And that's the meal. And that was a meal I made last night in the slow cooker, or yesterday in the slow cooker. We're having leftovers tonight. I know that's what I'm going to be having tonight after I take my son to lacrosse practice. That may be unrealistic, but pick one meal in a week. So if you've got 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 21 meals, 20 meals, you can do DoorDash, you can do Uber Eats. We don't have that where I live, by the way, but do all those things, but pick one meal where you're actually making that meal with your hands, and get your family involved, right? Like I get my kids involved. Like you're making the salad, and you're doing this, you're doing that. We get all involved and we sit down, and there's something rewarding about making something with your hands and then getting to enjoy that, whether that's the food that you cook, whether that's a craft that you enjoy making. You have to remember, we exist in this body, and the work that we do as coaches, consultants, as business people, largely is devoid of engaging this physical existence. So we have to find a balance for that. We have to find an outlet for that. So pick just one meal, make it, eat it with your family, agree on what that's going to be, whether it's, who knows, Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning, whatever, brunch, whatever you like to do, just do one in a week. And that's the minimum viable dose.
I love that. That's awesome. And then I love that as a daily practice. The food thing I think is extremely attainable, but no matter where you live, there's some piece of grass, even if you're in New York City, right? Like there's some piece of grass you can go out in the morning and just commit to, like, I'm going to go out here and stand, maybe say a quiet prayer, walk around, take my dog out barefoot, whatever, before you engage in the digital world and touch your phone. And then I love the idea of just like one meal a week. Maybe it's your Sabbath day or whatever. That's like the meal after church or service or whatever you do. It's just like a dedicated routine. Like we do have a family brunch that we have every Sunday. It is at home, and it is a staple of our routine. And I think like another practice that I've really tried to do is, we really try to emphasize experiences as a family more so than consumption. And so not to say they're necessarily cheap, like we do cool stuff, but like trips, and so next week, as we're recording this, our spring break trip, we're going to Sedona. And of course, we'll interact. We'll go to restaurants and things. We're going to spend a lot of time out in the things God's made and experiencing new ways to do that. And I'm taking my front row dad's band, as we call it, our small group. We're going to Breckenridge this summer. It's 4 days. So it's like a quick trip, but we're going to go hike a 14K, peak. And
that's awesome.
Like that stuff is just, to me, that's a return to real in a way that maybe I can't do it every day, but like once a year, I can at least set the intention at the beginning of the year that like I'm putting these things on my calendar, I'm committing to them, communicating with my family that this is important. Yeah, so that's beautiful.
2 things I'll add to that if react, and I know we're short on time, but I think this is valuable. 2 things. Number one, when you ask kids as adults what they remember most when they're growing up? 9 times out of 10, 90% of responses involve some type of trip.
Yep.
So how do we make space for this? Number one, we're going to make time for it because windows open, but windows close.
Yes.
Like windows don't last forever. So what we do in our family is we set an experience fund. So we budget for this. It's an experience budget. And we don't know exactly how we're going to use that money. And here's the thing. One of the things that I've learned with our kids is I try to teach how to experience awe and wonder in the mundane. It doesn't have to be first class tickets on Air Emirates to Dubai with gold crusted hotel. It doesn't have to be that.
Right.
It can literally be a camping day trip
Yes.
to the state park that's 45 minutes away and wonder in the mundane. But take trips, do the experiences.
Yeah, I love that. I have my core memory as a kid. When I grew up really poor and we didn't really do any vacations as a family, but my grandpa, we loaded up a pickup truck and 1 tank of gas and we drove. I live in the St. Louis area. We drove to Tennessee to this lake called Reelfoot Lake. And I remember we went crappie fishing for like 3 days. He taught me how to swim there. And I remember vividly as a 7-year-old, we went from one side of the lake to the other and I had this oar and I had to help get through this what I now know is like a culvert, right? It's just like this pipe and it's full of spiders. I'm sure there's one spider. In my mind is like these tarantulas everywhere and like such an adventure. I'm fighting our way through the tarantulas to get to the other side of the lake. And like, I remember like feeling like Daniel Boone, and I was like, what a memory. And it probably cost $100 or whatever to go down there and do this. And every book report I think in my elementary school is about Reelfoot Lake and how it was formed. And it was just like, it left such an impression. And I just love what you shared with that, the simplicity of that. So that we can end with a little more of a businessy note. I think we have the return to real, and that bakes into this question too. But I think I'd love to hear you just reflect a little bit for someone who's in this stage and maybe they're like, you know what? I feel like I'm really doing well. I made $200,000 last year. I'm a solo coach. People are respecting my work. I feel this pull to scale, but I don't really know what scale should feel like. And a phrase you actually said it earlier in this interview, but like, what are you optimizing for? That's a thought I've really been living with myself as we've experienced some rapid growth here at Seven Figure Leap. So I love just your reflection for that person, this woman who's sitting here and she's 200,000, she's coaching people and getting a lot of fulfillment out of that, but she doesn't know, should I build a big team? Should I be trying to exit someday? Should I just be content with where I'm at? Like, how do we wrestle with that? Because I know you've wrestled with it many times over your career.
Yeah, gosh. So I'm a big believer in the power of questions.
Yes.
Change your questions, change your life. And the question that you brought up, and it came up organically, is a question I would invite everyone listening to this or watching this right now to reflect on. And that is, what are you optimizing for? Like for me, I have this photo of my 2 boys, and it's me standing behind them as they're walking down this winding path. And it's from 2017. And they're tiny. They're tiny little kiddos. And I have the same photo of me standing behind these 2 kiddos from this year. And they're not tiny anymore.
Yeah, they're like as tall as you now, probably. Yeah.
And that window goes by so fast. So for me, what I'm optimizing for is, to quote Thoreau, you brought up Walden, to suck the marrow out of this season of life. That's what I'm optimizing for. So I'm personally not in empire building mode right now.
Yeah.
I'm in this mode of wanting to soak up. I coach soccer. I'm taking my son to lacrosse, cook dinner for the family. We go fishing. That's what I'm optimizing for. And I leave a lot of money on the table. Even the sale that I ultimately had with my business was not for $70 million. I'm just going to say
darn,
that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a lot of money left on the table, but I'm okay with that because I'm very, very clear on what I'm optimizing for. And what I'll end with is this. On the question of scale, I hear that all the time, but does it scale? How do I scale it? What I'll invite you to reflect on is this. The best things in life do not scale.
There's your quote. If you only got that from this interview, I think that and that'll transition into how we'll close and direct people to your current thought leadership. But yeah, so the best things in life don't scale. That's a truism if there ever was one, and it's definitely not something that gets brought up in the interwebs when you're talking about business growth. So yeah, I'm writing that down because for personal reasons. But as Ryan and I were talking a little bit before we hit record, I was talking about in my own business. Like we've had some rapid growth, and there are things I'm doing that are very much not scalable. Like I run a mastermind, and that is somewhat scalable. I cap it, and like I want a certain amount of personal attention, but I host 2 in-person events a year. I just had one in Florida a couple weeks ago. I don't charge for that, like I could, and I could like squeeze some more dollars out, but I really want people to be there, and I really want to remove any obstacle, because the moments that we share together in person and hugging and breaking bread and walking on the beach in this case and jumping in the ocean when it's freezing, like in a business sense and with my quote unquote business family, like that's the stuff that sticks, right? And I think that's the stuff I'm optimizing for. That doesn't mean I can't sell more courses or have more, coaching clients and things like that. But for me, it's important to build community and build human touch points and give people the freedom and transparency and vulnerability to show up and be real, to go back to that. So being real in the sense of, like touching the earth and growing your own food is amazing. But if you're even in your online business, I think there's ways to incorporate realness, human connection, vulnerability, transparency, some of the things I just said. And that was sort of a lightning bolt when you said that. I got chills because I'm like, I am doing that. I'm not sure I'm doing it consciously enough. I'm not sure I'm articulating as well as I can to the people receiving it. But that is that hit the nail on the head for me as far as like why I think I'm called and in this season with my business to not just like put the pedal in the metal, try to outsource everything, have everyone else handle all the things in the business so it can quote unquote scale. It's like I could do that, but it also I think I'd lose a lot of the joy and fulfillment I get from it. And so like, is that really worth that sacrifice?
The story of the Mexican fisherman.
Yes.
You get into this business as a coach, as a consultant, so you can help people, so you can engage with clients, you can connect with people at a deep level. And then if we're not careful, we end up putting things in our business so that we're doing none of those things. And we find ourselves like the Mexican fisherman who got into the business because we want to fish and build this fishing empire, spending no time at all fishing, just so you could do what? So you could retire and fish.
And
Well, you had it right from the beginning.
Yes. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, this is a total gift. I do want to, obviously people can go read the book, and all your thought leadership lives on the internet for people to find in many forms. But this Digital Contrarian, or the Digital Contrarian, because I know that's the URL.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that's ultimately how we started corresponding personally, since we didn't make it happen at Front Row Dads yet. But tell us what that's about, how people can access it, because I think it's a real gift that you're giving.
Yeah, so it's a perfect tie into our conversation. So last year, I made this realization that it had been 7 years since I had actually written something to my audience with my name attached to it that actually was personally written by me.
Wow.
I had a team of writers. We used obviously AI to create, and I was fed up with it. It was something that made me uncomfortable for a really long time. So I literally, sort of out of the blue, spontaneously just took my computer, opened it up, and started typing this letter that I called The Embarrassing Confession. And I wrote an email to our my entire email list.
Yeah, I remember getting that.
Yeah, and basically,
like, is this real? And I'm like, I think this is real. I know Ryan enough to know this is legit.
and I didn't know where that was going, but I sent that out on a Saturday, and then next Saturday I sent something else out, and the next Saturday I sent something else out, and I made this decision that once a week I would share real, raw, no AI, personally written by me, business wisdom, and oftentimes contrarian insight from lessons that I've learned along the way. And it's evolved into the Digital Contrarian, which is still personally written by me, nobody else, no editors. It's just all coming from me, that I write once a week. And it is really something that takes me, as crazy as this may sound, it takes me an entire day of my week to research the content, to write the content, to edit the content. And it's one of the most important things that I do. So if you're interested, you can go to thedigitalcontrarian.com. If you're curious, you can subscribe. And after you subscribe, you'll be asked to confirm your email address. And when you confirm your email address, you get access to all the archives. So if you want to see some of the more recent issues and some of the things that we've talked about, including the issue that spawned this conversation, you can go to that link and check it out.
Yeah, it's awesome too. I mean, there's some stuff about farming and permaculture and things like that, but it's very heavily focused on how you run a business right now, AI, your investing insights. It's a really well-rounded tap inside what is clearly a very brilliant mind, as we got a little taste of today. So I highly recommend it. My encouragement is like, go subscribe, and when Ryan shares something that really hits you between the eyes, hit reply and say, hey, I got here from Dustin and that podcast interview you did with him, and we'll complete a virtuous circle here. So Ryan, thank you so much again for the time, for the vulnerability, the insights. I don't know how often you talk about some of this stuff, but I feel really gifted to receive it, and I know our audience will as well. So thanks again for being here.
Amazing, Dustin. I really enjoyed our conversation and look forward to doing it again sometime soon.